where growth is intentional and impact is inevitable. So we ask that you won't just watch, engage with us. Don't just listen, but learn with us. And don't just sit back. Come take a seat at the table, because we are just getting started.
Good evening, everyone. We again are just getting started, and we welcome you all to another episode of Broadcasting Results with Rouse. Tonight, we're going to jump in and discuss a topic that indeed impacts every person, family, neighborhood, and community across South Carolina, and that's the census. When we see or describe where we stay and what we see every day in our livelihood or what we want, we know many things are surrounded by the census. However, you tend to notice that it's only once every 10 years that impacts your every single day, whether that's funding, infrastructure, education, or healthcare. And it can certainly be much more. But tonight we are joined by Mr. Don Francis, the Director of Outreach and Mobilization. Welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm so grateful to be a part, to be invited. As said, I'm director of outreach and mobilization. If you ever forget those three letters but want to know my title, it's Dom, DOM. So it'll work for you pretty well. But I don't want to hijack before we go anywhere. I'm gonna follow your lead, Turquoise. But just want to say, so excited to be on. This is a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I love the way you put that spin on how to remember your role is absolutely your name. Just remember Don, right? So that's a good catch. But if you could, for those that don't know about you or your role, can you tell us a little bit about your role and what you do?
Absolutely. So, as director of outreach and mobilization within South Carolina Counts, I think a good place for me to start is going to be saying, what is South Carolina Counts, right? We already said we're talking about the census, and it's like, oh, those people that come and knock at the door. I can get into it a little bit more, but the census is so much bigger than that moment when the people come and collect some information. You don't know where it's going if you even answer the door. Grew up in a neighborhood where oftentimes that was the case. So I'll start with the census. Let's think about two R's. We're going to talk about representation. We're going to talk about resources. The census happens every 10 years, and it's a count of all of the people that live here in the United States. And it's to help get resources and representation. And so when I say resources, what I'm talking about is for every person counted in the census, $3,000 is allocated to their state per year within the census term. So, in other words, every person counted is worth $30,000 to their state in resources. Okay, well, where does that money go? In South Carolina, I'm gonna tell you, raise your hand or just nod along because I can't see you. If you agree that you're tired of driving over a plate or a pothole in South Carolina, well, yes, census dollars go towards infrastructure. They go towards building roads and bridges. They go towards education. They go towards health related programs for folks experiencing homelessness, for for lunch, after school meal programs, all these different things. Anything you can name that is a public service is probably touched by census dollars in one way or another. There's over 350 some odd federally funded programs and initiatives that fall into the category of census dollars. So that's the resource side of things. Now, the representation side of things. As we are counted, the legislators in position determine how district maps are drawn. So you talk about redistricting. I just threw another R in there, but that goes under the representation category. You, as a community is counted, you determine how many representatives represent South Carolina at a national level, but you also determine how your district lines are drawn even within your specific community. So, getting counted in the long term for the next 10 years in a census term will determine just how your lines are drawn. So, who you're voting for. We talk about voting and the importance of that, but The census helps us determine who we even get to vote for. Because if the line is drawn a certain way, you might not vote for so and so representative. You might end up having to vote in an election completely irrelevant to the individual that you might want to vote for otherwise. So I just laid a whole long foundation. I can be long winded sometimes. Turquoise is going to have to reel me in. Um, but that to say, as director of outreach and mobilization, my charge is to make sure that as many individuals in the state of South Carolina as possible know about this information, because a lot of people don't know it, and they don't know why it's so significant, how it's so significant to our resources and representation, and again for a decade long time. And so practically, and we can get into more of the specifics later, but practically what I'm trying to do is make sure that every community across the state, and I'm thinking of it in terms of counties, so that's 46 counties, every county in the state of South Carolina has a group of people that are prepared, willing, and excited to make sure that we are in the know about this. And I know I didn't say this, let me say now, the census happens every 10 years. Don, when's the next census? 2030. Now, you're going, nah, that's 4 years away. We got time. Let me just say in short, so I don't keep droning on, that no, we actually don't have a lot of time. We're already, the clock is ticking and time is of the essence. We need all the time we can get to make sure that communities are in the know and ready to participate as best as they can and be civically engaged.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So I want to go back for a second because I truly want the viewers, and if you all are coming in, welcome this evening. And if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments area. But Don, you talked about numbers early on, and I want to make sure we kind of break that down a little bit because, again, like you said, while it seems like we have time, we want to make sure that people are truly prepared and ready, and yet fired up when we go after the census again for 2030. But you talked about in 10 years, a particular individual would have a sum of $30,000. Is that correct?
For every person counted over the course of 10 years, $30,000 is allocated to the state. So, say if I don't get counted, that's $30,000 over the course of 10 years our state doesn't get for all those program examples I named.
Okay. And so I want to go into that a little bit, but I know along we would dive into it more because there's always this thing, right? When people are knocking on the door, as you mentioned, and some people don't want to account for who all is in their household. And so essentially we're leaving money on the table, right? If we don't make sure that everyone in the household is accounted for. And so I want to kind of go back to, I see that you're really, really passionate about the work that you do. And I want people to not just hear the information from you, but truly feel the passion from the work that you do and why you dive so much into it. So can you kind of just tell us like what inspired you to become more involved with this kind of work?
What really inspired me is, man, and I can tell a long story that I won't make too long. My mom is the youngest of 10 kids, uh, born and raised in Summerville, South Carolina. I was born and raised in Summerville, South Carolina. And I got to see my parents navigate and provide in a very exceptional way for myself and my brother. We historically, my mom's side of the family comes from, for the terms low socioeconomic, didn't come from a whole lot, right? And to see my parents progress and be able to navigate a system and and get above, quote unquote, get above the fray a little bit and be able to provide us a life that was so exceptional, and access to good education and a good neighborhood and all these things. It was just sweet, and I'm super proud of my parents, and I'm super thankful for them and the Lord for them. I'm so thankful. And at the same time, that's not everybody's story.
Mm,
There are folks, and I know it's not everybody's story that progression doesn't happen, because I see it in my own family. Again, my mom being the youngest of 10, I see cousins, I see family members, I see friends in my community as I'm growing up not have as much, right? Or be able to make do with what they have. And as a person who even studied public health. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in the realm of public health. Something that I had to acknowledge was that we don't always maximize the resources that we have available. Do we need more? Absolutely. Do not hear me say that there is not much more to be asked of those with access to resources. In addition, as I learned about the census, what I learned was there's some opportunities we need to take advantage of. There's, for lack of better words, low hanging fruit that we can allow to help us. And you even made a point of mentioning, yeah, some of us, and I said it first, but some of us might not necessarily open the door. I come from that demographic. I grew up with, what they doing? Peek through the blinds. I don't know them. They got a clipboard. I'm not worried about it. Here's the fun thing people don't know about the census. You don't even got to open your door to nobody. That's actually the last step. There's opportunity for you to submit information for the census via phone, online, all that stuff months before enumerators, that's what they're called, months before enumerators come to the door and ask for that information. So it doesn't even have to be a face-to-face interaction. But what I'll say in addition to that is the way the information is collected, and I could go there, but I want to stick to the question, so I'm gonna circle back. The way the information is collected is actually not identifying a whole lot about you. What it's doing is engaging with a system that says, based on how many people have submitted information, is how much money is going to be provided to a state. So in South Carolina, as are most places in the United States, we have at best, and these are based on estimations, a 99% completion rate. It's like, oh, we're doing great. It's like, well, 1% of over 5 million people is over 50,000 people not counted. So that 50,000 people, not each of them accounting for $30,000, is billions of dollars that the state doesn't get for the very things that I grew up seeing. And even my brother and I lived kind of different lives because he's 10 years older than me. And so my parents progressed. Um, Seeing people near and dear to me not get access to things and say, man, I wish I had more, when there are very low hanging fruit, 10-minute surveys worth of low hanging fruit opportunities for us to be able to get more money for our community. And of course, you got to have the conversation about, like, well, how do we hold folks accountable for using that money that the state receives? And that's a worthy conversation to have. But I'm just at step one. I'm passionate about this because I grew up very adjacent to seeing folks not having a lot. And I want to see us have more. I want to see our community have more. I want to see communities of color. I want to see communities socioeconomically not as advantaged have more. And it lights me up because I'm like, man, I won't speak on behalf of SC Counts, but for myself as a follower of the Lord, I I'm supposed to love God and love people. And how do I love people? I do my best to make sure that I can pursue good opportunities for my neighbor. And this was one of the ways I saw to do it on a very high level, not just an individual level, maybe volunteering somewhere, or in, not that that's bad because I do that too, but not just volunteering somewhere, or not just, giving affirmations or paying it forward, but what can we do on a community scale to make sure that our neighbor is getting the best that they can? Man, at this rate, you're going to be able to ask me like three questions, and we're going to get it together. But thank you for giving me that space to kind of air it out. Yes, I'm very passionate about it. Yes, I get excited about it because it's so important and so relevant.
Absolutely. And the one thing about being passionate about it is people see the drive that you have. And so when we see individuals like yourself out in the community wanting to get people involved or educate them, make them aware, it just makes you a little bit more approachable to know that this person is truly passionate about the work that they're doing. So I appreciate you being willing to share that. But I do want to go, you mentioned about SC counts. Can you tell us, for those that don't really know about SC counts, can you tell us a little bit about SC counts, please?
Absolutely. So, SC Counts, a grassroots organization entirely concerned with making sure that folks are as civically engaged as they can be. All right, when you say civic engagement, Dom, what are you talking about? Some of those things I mentioned, making participating in the census is a civic engagement activity. Thinking about redistricting and how county lines are drawn and who you may be able to vote for, a civic engagement activity. Um, but the SE Counts was built out of a need for people to receive more information. Sometimes folks go, "Oh, you're doing the census thing, so you need somebody to knock on doors," or and it's like, well, actually, let's create a separation here. Sorry, y'all, I talk with my hands. Hopefully, that's not too distracting there. Keep them low. But oh, so you're going to be door knocking? Do you need somebody else? And it's like, no, no. Again, enumerators are a later step. But in addition, the federal government actually doesn't place a lot of money into educating people about the census. The folks that go and collect the data are not the same folks that go and give information. And actually, as it stands, every state doesn't have a body or a group of people that educate on the census. And so, what does that mean? We're that much more behind the eight ball as a nation on knowing why it's important, how to get involved, and how to get resources for the community. And so, SC Count said, okay, let's make sure that people are in the know. There needs to be a centralized entity that can say, hey, this is the information you need to know. Here are go to resources that we can provide. Here is support that you can have in building up your community and pursuing better outcomes for your community. And so, again, in short, SE Counts, grassroots organization, totally concerned with civic engagement, and not some folks might be going, okay, well, what's the angle or how much does it cost? No, this is all we want to support the community, and so that's what we're going to do. The angle is if you get involved in uh, your community can be galvanized and energized to participate as best you can just to do your part, whether it's just filling out that census survey. Like that's the win for SC Counts. The win is us coming together. The win is us collaborating on events. And so yeah, I'll stop there and say if there's a specific uh, aspect I can speak to, let me know. But overall,
Thank you.
that's us.
Thank you again, you all. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments area. Don, I do want to go back. When we talk about the census and every 10 years, I want to make sure that while our young people are coming through the system, our older senior citizens, our middle class or middle age individuals, somebody may have that question like, why every 10 years? Why do we wait every 10 years to conduct the census? Can you kind of tell us briefly, to your knowledge, why that happens?
Absolutely. So my speculation, well, first, I won't say speculation, I'll say fact. It was written into the Constitution now over a century ago that the census would be held every 10 years.
Right.
And so some of that is that's what's on the books and that's what we maintain. Now, my speculation to why that hasn't changed is because it's a very time, energy, resource consuming process to try to count all of the individuals in the nation. And that's why I made that disclaimer about enumerators are really a follow up step. Again, there are online surveys, there's mail, there's phone, all of those sorts of things. But when the government sends out enumerators, that is now extra money. That is uh, resources that the government pulls from to make sure that folks are counted. So now there's resource allocation going in a different direction. But then you also think about the amount of money that they have to put into not only collecting the data, but then um, what's the term I want to use? I could get real technical, and I don't want to do that because I don't think it's necessary. But essentially, they very intentionally collect data in a way that de-identifies the information given so that
Mhm.
you know the breakdown by county, but you don't. necessarily know, or I think even by state, county is actually very hard, but you don't have to peg it to a specific person's name. They go through leaps and bounds to make sure that that data is not abused. Um, and I'm actually pretty sure I have to check the stats on this. I believe census data can only be released as far as like on a very local level every 75 years or something like that. I was talking with some friends who had let me know that they got to find out things about their family tree and their lineage, but it was starting at like their great grandparents, their grandparents' generation, because of how long they hold on to specifying information.
Right.
Um, and it's actually a felony to for even the police. I think that's even earmarked specifically for law enforcement to use that information or try to access that information to use it in any sort of way. Now, that to say, we know that the law should be black and white and sometimes gray area is created. So we always tell people to exercise caution and use their best use the most discernment they have to engage as they feel most appropriate. But I did want to go on record saying that specific census personalized information is something that legally has been said not to be allowed to be released. Uh,
Thank you. Thank you for that. I would also add too, when we talk about the census and kind of why it's conducted every 10 years, is population, right? And so we want to make sure that every community has a fair opportunity for, you talked about it early, fair funding. We talk about, the quality of life in in your community or where you may stay at. You want to make sure your local government have the right resources, your schools, your hospitals, and you mentioned early on about these roads. And so I want to lead to our rural areas. From what you know or the experience you have in the community, why would you recommend or why should someone in our rural areas of South Carolina care enough to say that they want to complete the census, given that sometimes those are areas that are underserved?
Yeah, I it's one of those things that it almost might sound like I'm oversimplifying it. And I think actually what you asked fits very well with what Jaden asked, so we can come to that too. It may sound oversimplified, but if you think about it, if you're in an area where there aren't a lot of resources, not engaging in the census is only going to increase that lack of resources that you have. So I think about rural areas and there's conversations about roadways and infrastructure. There's conversations about broadband. There's conversations about how certain schools or certain housing looks. I was actually talking to a colleague of mine, Lashandra Morgan, and she was telling me how in the areas that she serves in the community around Orangeburg, Calhoun, Barnwell, in that region of the state, some of the physical structures, again, like I think about a school, the bathrooms be terrible, maybe even troughs. I think she said not even actual urinals or toilets. It's like you look at imagery like that and you go, man, why should my community participate in that if this is the state we're in? Well, it's like, well, if we don't participate, we definitely don't stand a chance then.
Mhm.
It
Absolutely.
would exacerbate the issue for us to disengage.
Thank
And
you.
and just really quickly, if I could, Jaden, hey,
Yeah,
there.
I did want to get to his question as well.
Yep, yep. Well, Jaden is someone that I work very closely with in other work that I do, and she asked, what methods have been the most successful in engaging community members who have historically been hesitant to participate? And there, I would say it's community by community, right? There's not a one size fits all. I think even myself as identifying as a black man might respond differently being here living most of my adult life in Columbia than someone who's living in Cross, South Carolina, or someone who's living in Greenville, South Carolina. And so when you develop solutions, you really want to come from inside the community, having authentic enough relationship to say like, hey man, like keep it a buck with me. What would make you participate, or what information is it that you need, or who do you need to hear it from? I don't want to abuse that because I feel like there are certain spaces where this is overused, but trusted messengers is an important and real thing, right? It's different when I'm having barbershop talk and we're talking about what's real versus when I go to vote at the polls and there's a pamphlet on the table. Like, yeah, that's cool, but those are two very different settings, two very different messengers. And so that trust and authentic connection is real. I'll say it varies, and I know that's very generic, but again, to be specific, I think trusted messaging is important. Developing community buy-in. You heard me say there's 46 counties. I want a group in each county. That's because, yes, I have a lot of passion, a lot of fire, and I can engage people as much as possible. But also, the people from home are going to say it better than me, and I know they are. And I want to humbly submit to that and say, hey, we're on the same team. Um, Jaden, you being from Beaufort, I would expect you to know how to send a message better than I could to people in Beaufort. So.
Thank you, and thank you again, Jaden, for asking that question. Again, if anyone else have any more questions, you're welcome to put it in the comment area. Now, I want to go to, you know, talking about dollars, because I feel like it's also important for people to understand it. And so we talked about 30,000 over the 10 years, and so for people that may potentially say, well, if I'm renting, I don't need to be counted.
Mm,
And, it's always that question whether you rent or owner. So I want to specifically make sure that our people understand we knock on doors, we're looking for household individuals. While, it may ask the question whether you're renting or own, it's still important at the end of the day that you complete the census overall. So do you want to speak a little bit more to that?
absolutely. Let me say this. The census is a count of everyone who uses the resources in the area that you live. And so what happens is if we take ourselves out of the race because we say, "Oh, well we rent, we don't own, but you got kids that go to school," now that school is not getting that money. Or we rent but we don't own, now that hospital, the health system in your area doesn't get that money. We rent, but we don't own the roads, the bridges, the broadband connection. Money is not going to be diverted that way because then when we look at it on paper, we say, well, there's only this number of people here formally documented. So this is how much money we can be held accountable to give to that area. And even past renting or owning, maybe it's like, I got somebody couch surfing, we're under the radar. Hey, again, that information is disassociated with personal identification, but we need that because that person couch surfing trying to make ends meet also is utilizing the public services that we need money for.
Thank you. And I also want to make sure that people know that every child in the house
That's
needs to be accounted for as well.
Preach on that. Children are one of the most undercounted demographics when talking about the census. So one of the groups of individuals that is least counted. And sometimes it's hard, right? Because we have the cards stacked against us. If the census only happens every 10 years, well, think about all the people that have children within then. So that puts us behind the eight ball. So it's like we've, as census educators, something that I've been trained on is yes, if you are pregnant, count your baby.
Right.
Uh,
Absolutely.
if you have kids in the house, it doesn't matter how old they are, count all of the kids because they are using those resources that we need.
And even down to like people that have kids that go off to college and military, if they're still accounted at that particular address, they should indeed be accounted for. And so we want to make sure that people understand while we're 4 years, ahead of time, we want to be able to educate and make sure that you all are aware now so that when we, online or whether that is a knock on the door, you are fully aware or engaged and you could start having a conversation with your family members and friends as well. So, I don't know if you want to share more to that because sometimes in these smaller communities, rural communities, like you say, flying under the radar, sometimes we are undercounted, but yet we're not counted because we don't make sure to account for every individual pregnant, count you and that child as well. So I'm glad you also made that point of it. But is anything else you want to speak on to that part before we move on?
Really quickly, I'll say that was a great clarification about, oh, what if people go to school or military or whatever? Wherever you wherever you lay your head, the predominance of the year in the United States, that's where you need to be counted. There was a mantra that one of my old teammates used to say that we want to count everyone in the right place one time. So,
Yeah. Thank you for that. So I want to make sure that we don't miss the opportunity for you to kind of tell us like maybe one of the biggest misconceptions you've heard since working in this field as it relates to the census or even with SE counts.
man, the biggest well, I already kind of broached that biggest misconception about SC counts. It's usually, oh, so let me know when you get counting people. I'm like, mm-mm, I ain't knocking on nobody's door. At least not for that. At least not for that. But what I'll say about the census, big misconception is the government's going to use that information against me and I'm going to get in trouble. Um, and again, there's I always say do what you feel most comfortable with, but this has been a practice for a long time, and legal guardrails have been placed in this for a long time. The way the information is collected in such a way that you as an individual are not identified in that data for years, but it can be a contribution. Like I said, I had a friend who said 75 years later, she has a better idea of her family tree because her great so and so, I can't remember who it was, but participated in the census. And so I mentioned resources and representation, but there's also this little personal piece, I think, especially for individuals in the Black community where record keeping hadn't always been good. And, some of that was, I'm sure, by design or at least the result of design. But there's opportunity for us to learn even more or have even more information about ourselves or our past or for future members of our family.
Thank you for that. So you talked about, the census obviously not until 2030. And so although, the next one won't be till several years away, why do you or what would you offer to individuals that are listening and can share with their family members? Why should communities start preparing now?
Ooh, all right. You just I get excited and you just
I
keep
saw it.
more exciting questions. I'm calm down. Yes. So I'll tell you from my experience. So I was a part of census education efforts in 2018 leading up to the census in 2020. And so that means 2 years out, there were folks designated in Columbia. It was a Columbia Complete Count Committee uh, delegated to a leader in China, Phillips, from Mayor Steve Benjamin. They Mayor Steve directed China to build this committee, and for 2 years we had 15, 20 people in various sectors across Columbia trying to get people involved, and there were complete count committees throughout South Carolina because SC Counts was already making rumblings of educating folks. Even then, our efforts been more robust now, but that to say, 2 years out, we're doing that education, and we still had a at least 50,000 person undercount. And so if we have traditionally, because that's not the first time a complete count committee has been designated in South
Mhm.
Carolina, but if traditionally we have been starting 2 years out and then we get to the finish line and go, man, we missed out on money. Well, get them next time. I don't know if folks are familiar with the phrase, the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. And so if we know we've tried in the past more than once to 1 year out, 2 years out, educate folks and it's still not moving the needle, we got to take it up a notch.
Mhm.
So that's again where SC Counts comes in and says, let's make this a household conversation. Let's make this
Absolutely.
a perpetual thing. Let's make that part of normal dialogue and talking. I think about voting and over the decades how far that has come, right? There was a time where it's like, get out and vote. And now that's an assumption. In some communities, not everybody, in some communities it's like post your picture of you with your voting sticker. Like that's there's excitement and buzz around that. That's the level of engagement and familiarity we would want folks to also have with engagement in the census. Because again, yes, it's great to vote, but it's a multi-leg stool here, right? It's a three-leg stool. You can vote, but who you vote for depends on how your district lines are drawn. Okay, how your district lines are drawn depends on how many people participate in the census. So you take any one of those legs out, and now you have this thing where either you don't have the opportunity to vote for maybe who you ideally think you should vote for, or maybe you don't feel like your community is represented well, or maybe you don't feel like you have the resources you need. So you kind of got to do all the things, but that's something that proactively needs to happen. We got to keep hitting that drum. We got to march to the same beat of, hey, let's make sure we know about this and let's continue to do it because it's easy to forget. There's a lot of things going on in life and it has to be an ongoing conversation. You mentioned multiple generations earlier, right? Talking about um, generations that might be considered grandparents to those that might be considered kids. If we don't keep talking about it, the fire burns. We got to keep feeding it. We got to keep talking about it.
Absolutely. And, while you were saying that, I think the other thing when we talk about, how do we start preparing communities today or what that will look like for 2030, starting now, that helps us build a little bit more trust in the community for individuals. When we talk about our senior citizens that may want to, they are very serious about completing things in regards to, applications or whatever, but some of them need that additional support, but they want to make sure they're not giving too much or giving too less, so they're very cautious about kind of what they put out there, because again, some of them are still raising grandkids, right? And so I think now preparing for it helps us build that trust, allow us to work with community partners such as churches, nonprofits, schools, community organization, to do more outreach. And then again, the bigger picture overall, the ultimate goal would just be able to educate our community. So I appreciate what you were sharing, but I just wanted to kind of add on to that, building that trust factor now. So that, as you said earlier, you was one of those parties that's peeping out of the window like, I don't think I have to answer the door today. But that could be a grandmother that's sending her granddaughter or son to the door next time, and figure there's somebody out there with a clipboard we don't have to answer, right? But
Right.
now we get out there and get in the communities and start engaging to build that trust factor. They see the people moving now. It just comes just so easy or smooth transition when 2030 comes, because they will be well aware, they will be more educated. We will have churches and nonprofits and community organization involved. And so we want to see those numbers increase from what it was in 2020 and 2030 as well. Um,
Absolutely.
so you talk about voting, which everything obviously plays a factor or helps support one or the other. So what do you believe this, or how would this be a bigger opportunity, or the biggest opportunity for South Carolina, getting people out when we talk about civil engagement, getting people out to vote, and also making sure they complete the census.
Right. Um, Say that for me one more time. I'm
So I
getting
was just,
tired of it.
yeah, you're good. I just wanted to, piggyback on what you said about, civil engagement, voting, in the
Yep.
census. So we talk about the biggest opportunity for South Carolina right now. Like, how do
Yes.
you see making sure that we are involved in voting, completing the
Yeah.
census, and making sure we have a greater impact for South Carolina overall?
Yeah, absolutely. So biggest opportunities hard, but some of the big ones. I'll give a top two, top three. Um, Things we need to keep in mind are, I think, and this is going to be kind of generic, but surrounding ourselves with other people who are concerned and civically engaged, almost almost to give us the momentum to do the each one teach one, right? Because I, as a professional in this space, can talk about all the stuff that I know, but then I'm gonna come to Dr. Rouse and she's gonna tell me something else. And then I'm going to talk to Jaden and she's going to tell me something else. And being able to work as a network to make sure that we're in the know, up to date, and working together is going to help us not only keep ourselves informed, but keep ourselves more equipped to give information to those around us. So I think about, you can go online pretty quickly and look at, I think it's from the Commission on Voting, gives you all the races in your county. All you got to do is Google that. You can even enter your information. It'll tell you specifically, where you're supposed to vote, what's your precinct, all of those things. But that's important. I mentioned that specifically when I talk about being equipped with something, because it's not always that you have to hold it all in your head.
All right.
If you have folks around you that are engaged in intentionally having dialogue and making sure that folks are reminded, and some places you can go where you can find that information, that's going to be enough honest effort to drive you forward the way that you need to be. So I think about that, A, but then B, and I mean, of course, this is shameless plug on ramp for me to say, a big opportunity around the census specifically is reach out to me, and I can make sure that folks have my contact information before I get off. Find out if your county has a complete count committee and if it's active, because complete count committees, and I'm actually going to back up. Formally, the term was complete count committee. And that just refers to a committee of folks that want their community to be civically engaged, make sure they're in the know about the census, and that's kind of where it lands. Something that SC Counts is sort of branded is a share and shape committee. So it includes complete count, but I like titles, and so share and shape is really about sharing information. It's about pursuing our fair share of resources. It's also about shaping our community and making sure those district lines are drawn well. And so we're trying to get a share and shape committee in all 46 counties because we want a guidepost. We want to draw a line in the sand and say, here, let's step up and be that designated hub of information, of accountability, of encouragement, of education to make sure that our community in specific has what it needs. And now hear me say, I know across the county, everybody doesn't necessarily work intimately together, but 46 is what we got right now, and from there maybe it's subcommittees, or maybe it's cross sections of um, east and west side of town or what have you, but making sure that we put forth our best effort in being unified and pursuing everything that we can. And for SC Counts, one of the big ways we're doing that is through share and shape committees.
Thank you for that. So, I know you've definitely shared a lot here tonight, but I also want to give you a chance to talk about kind of an overview of 2020, into what you would want a projected look for 2030. And so you would have had a chance to kind of see what, the results of the census were in 2020. So we're almost 10 years out, and kind of what you would encourage community members to do to help us continue to get involved in the process.
Absolutely. So I mentioned it at the top that the estimation is that we had 99% of folks in South Carolina counted. And I can get into the nitty gritty of how they make that estimation because it's like, well, if you know how many people were counted, don't you know how many people were counted? Not exactly, because what the challenge with that is it's an estimation based on the resources used and where people live, but not they know that that is not reflected in how many people were counted either via surveys submitted or via enumerators. Now, I think a better number and more reflective number of what we need to compare between 2020 and 2030 is a less than 70% self completion rate. What that means is less than 70% of South Carolinians took the opportunity to submit information for the census before the enumerators even came to the door. That means less than 70% of people were aware or willing to engage on the front end, and as a result, we may not have gotten all of the resources that we could have gotten for the state. And so, moving forward, the goal, ideal world, pie in the sky, everybody is counted. I know that might not happen, but I want to see the move. I want to see the needle move to 75 or 80%. I want to see more people before anyone even comes knock on the door. I want to see as a state more people in South Carolina saying, I know that this is an opportunity for resources and representation, and I am showing that I know that and that I'm fired up about that by completing the census. And so, like I said, for share and shape committees, I can talk about that. That might sound like a large undertaking, but in essence, I even have a document made with a framework. You're talking about 5 to 10 hours of energy needed a week from one person to really get the ball rolling. But I'll also say as a sidebar to that that a lot of us are already in our own ways operating as share and shape committees. Even as I'm sitting on this call with Dr. Rouse, I'm so grateful for you in not only pulling me in, but me looking at the body of work that you've already contributed to, thinking about, this live that you have and that you do from week to week, making sure that people are up to date on what's happening in the community. That is at the heart and the spirit of what we need to do if we're going to move the needle in terms of how many people are responding to the census, and as a result, how much resources we're getting and how appropriately we're being represented.
Thank you, Don. You've definitely shared a wealth of information here tonight, and I'm hopeful that community members will indeed take this and share with other individuals as well, so that we could indeed move the needle. Right? We want to make sure for the next 4 years we see the engagements of people that are ready to complete the census, but also just educate, make people more aware, and have those conversations. Is there any other information that you would like to share, and or any upcoming events that you would like to share to community members so that they be aware of?
Absolutely. Um, two things come to mind, and the first one is, if you don't mind, just want to ask the folks listening, watching, if you're available, just drop in the chat. I like to be engaged with, and some folks have asked some things. Drop in the chat what county you're from. Just throw it in there. I want to see who maybe is most excited right now. What county are you tuning in from, or are you from? Because maybe you're somewhere else. And hey, to Regina, I just wanted to say that really quickly. Thank you. Um, but things that I things to look out for. One, we have a education series coming up soon that will be called the Rush Hour Rundown. And so SC Counts is doing that in an effort to educate folks and do it in a quick way. If you don't necessarily have a lot of time, I'm asking for a maximum of 30 minutes. It might be 20. Why is it called Rush Hour Rundown? We're going to do it right after you get off the clock. So 5:15 until at max 5:45 while you're in that commute and bumper to bumper traffic anyway. Just take a listen and hear little snippets of what's going on. I was firing off a lot of stats, but really to be able to sit with some specific things about the census, some specific things about Richland, um, some specific things maybe even about voting or having guests on, just to get people in the know in maybe an informal way of training, making sure that folks understand more about what is this share and shape thing that Dom is talking about, or what else does he know that's going on. So I would say July 20th, be on the lookout for that. You can find us at SC Counts on SC Counts 2030 on Facebook, SC Counts on LinkedIn, SC Counts 2030 on Instagram. So many ways. In addition, my email, and I should put this in the chat, is Dominique P. Francis at gmail.com, where I am not as technologically savvy as I want to be when I'm
Okay.
but that is DOMINIQUEP Francis at gmail.com. So, folks, please reach out if you want to be in the know more. And please continue to tune into this show because Dr. Rouse is doing a great job. This is the first time I popped up, but it's not the first time I've witnessed, and it won't be the last. Um, and I think those are the big things for me right now, but there'll definitely be more coming soon.
I appreciate that. And so, with what you shared, that date again was July 20th.
July 20th, that's a Monday, and it will be at 5:15.
Okay, 5:15. And individuals will be able to log on virtually to take
Correct.
advantage of it. Okay.
That is
And
correct.
it's free.
It's
All we
free.
need is a little bit of your time.
That's right.
Just a
In,
little bit of your time.
in time, you might be already frustrated and need to focus on something else because people driving crazy.
So, is there anything else? I know that there's a lot that you could have obviously dived more specifically into, and we would have more time to do that. I just wanted us to indeed have the conversation so that people can kind of start tuning into the census, right? So, we're not waiting at that very 2029 year going into 2030 and we realize, oh, we need to start knocking on doors. We need to start making sure people get the online access. Now we can start having these conversations and get a little bit more engaged so that people would see, while voting is important, we also know numbers plays a factor. Like data, people are sitting at the table every day looking at it. And so I just appreciate you. I love your drive, your passion. You're very, very passionate about the work that you do, which goes a long way. Thank you to Jaden and others that was tuning in and asking your questions as well. But is there anything else before we prepare to close out that you want to recap or share to anyone?
I'll say SC Counts is here to support what you got going on. If you want to be engaged, but you're like, I can't take on another thing, that's fine. Just have a conversation. Let's talk about how we can align. We don't have to create anything new. We are all about making sure that SC counts because South Carolina does count. We want everyone counted because we count. We matter.
Thank you, thank you. Tonight, you all, I just sit here as he was talking. It definitely reminds us that the census isn't just simply about counting, right? Or people counting. It is about ensuring that every person counts. That's meaning every child, every senior, every family, indeed every neighborhood, as he mentioned, Somerville to Richland, and from Richland all the way down to Williamsburg, going down to Horry. We see the difference in our communities. And so that's why it's important that you understand that you deserve to be represented. You deserve to receive the resources that is needed to strive. And so we want every community to truly be counted for. We want every individual as much as we can to be in position that we can ensure funding, improving services. He talked about the roads earlier, creating opportunities for our younger generations. As much as he wanted for his kids, I want it for my nephews as well. And so to you, Mr. Francis, I want to say again, thank you for sharing your information tonight, for just giving us some more insight on how we can help ensure to work beside you to ensure that our people understand the census a little bit more. And to you all, our viewers, thank you all for tuning in. And so we say to you, as always, until next time, we want to continue to create pathways growing stronger in our communities. And remember that every voice matters because every counts. And so till next time, you all, thank you all again for tuning in. Broadcasting Results with Rouse.